Hello and welcome to Franchising Uncut, a spin-off of Tell a Chef and Story, a podcast series by BDC Partners where we talk to leading franchisors and industry representatives about their success in franchising and retail. I'm your host, Bruce McFarlane. I usually have a co-host. I haven't got him today. I've sacked him. But today I'm here with Jon Sully, CEO of BDC Investments. So prior to BDC Investments, welcome, John.
Thanks, Bruce.
You bought and started a number of businesses. You exited some businesses. You operated some businesses. So we're going to talk about a couple of those before we sort of talk generally about investing generally. But so let's do a couple of them. So Michelle's Patisserie, you started out as a master franchisee for Victoria. So what attracted you to that brand? You know, what were some of the things you looked for in investing into buying into a business or starting a business?
Yeah, when I first teamed up with Stuart James, who was the MD at Mr. Minute, I was headhunted to go there by him because they were on a massive growth curve. Anyhow, things changed. They were owned by the Swiss bank, and we started looking at businesses outside that because we'd read the cash flow quadrant and we had very similar ideas about that. So long story short, we looked around at a couple of options, and then because I knew the Knowles, I'd done deals with them, we looked at Michelle's, came down here, and we looked at it at that business, and it was the masters were running it very poorly. They weren't engaged in the business at all, but clearly the model itself worked because it had been working in Sydney. So it was a matter of tidy everything up, rinse and repeat, just day in, day out, you know, making sure that the franchisees were making money. They got their product, they had stuff to sell, that it was fresh, they didn't have mould on it. That would have been a refreshing change for the franchisees. And tighten up the brand. There were some stores that were selling alcohol, for example. We had to get rid of that. So it was really understanding what we had to do to get it back in line with the brand because the brand was working.
So
the model was working, I should say.
Yeah, so you're looking, so interesting, I guess a lot of people's experience in getting into franchising is either as a franchisee or they've got an existing business and they become a franchisor, but you've come in that mid-level as a master franchisee. So you know, thinking about getting into the business, you've obviously saw a brand that you liked, but thought you could help make a difference at a master franchise level. So how many franchisees were there at this stage?
16. There were 16 in Victoria. I can't really remember how many there were up in Sydney, but I want to say 160 to 180, something like that. And then there was a couple in Queensland. So that's that was 2000. So yeah, that would have been the numbers. And it was more about the franchising is a widget. You know, that's the you know, I thought of when we bought Michelle's that I was just going to turn it into a big fat turd because I was eating cakes and pies and all sorts of stuff, which didn't happen. Well, maybe a little bit. But so it was more about the widget and just applying just basic principles to that business. And it was replicating what was working. It was as simple as that.
So I'll talk later about thinking about the business, but at this stage, you've got to build relationships with your franchisees. At the same time, you're a franchisee for the Knowles. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about the dynamics in both directions. So how did you build trust amongst the franchisees as the master franchisee?
We did what we said we were going to do, and we made sure that the product was fresh, that we moved away from the bakery that was producing the product straight away. We had a franchise meeting where we invited the franchisees to give us feedback to say what was poor, what was not working, what had been done badly, and give them the opportunity to vent. That was absolutely important, critical. But giving them that product and that faith in the product that it was right, they could stand behind it and sell it with confidence. That was probably the most important part, and that took a while because they were so low for what they'd been conditioned to accept mediocrity at the very best. So we had to get them back up to that level and having confidence when someone came to the counter, they were happy to sell an eclair or a mud cake or whatever, because they knew it was going to be good.
So before I'll get back to the Knowles, sorry, just on the follow-up, but how many franchisees? So you had 16 or 17 when you started. What did Victoria get to while you're a master franchisee?
Oh, look, I think that was about 50 or 60, I think.
Yep.
And then I think it was that, yeah. And then when we went to, we bought Queensland about 3 years later, I would have thought, maybe even 4.
So again, just thinking about investment criteria. So you think, well, look, it's working in Victoria.
Yep.
We've got the support of the franchisor. We know how to treat the franchisees. We can do this again.
Yep.
And then, so your relationship with the Knowles was obviously pretty good at this, time. You're working through it. So the next part is when they wanted to exit, how did you decide to, hang on, we can do this for the whole country now?
Yeah, well, it was a very different time, luckily, but we went to the Knowles were actually talking to RFG at the time, and then when we were chatting, they realised that the owner of RFG might have been a very difficult person to sell to, so they went with us. We had the ANZ private equity group that were part of the ANZ Bank. The Knowles funded in their CEO at the time, a guy called Jon Sully, and out they went. It took a little while, but it was a very familiar purchase because we knew what was going on. We knew the history. We knew how to grow it. It was just like adding another glove to the one that we already had on. So it was pretty simple, and a simple exit for them as well. So, I think they knew that there was going to be no reprisals if we found something or uncovered something. But we knew about it all. We knew the teams. We knew everything. So it was natural for them, much easier.
So you've become the franchisor. So you're obviously acting as a franchisor when you're a master franchisee. So now you're the franchisor. You've grown the network. You and your partners and the other people in the business, not you by yourself.
Yep, exactly.
Grew the business. You've got to 360 odd stores, and then RFG comes back to the table.
Mm-hmm.
How did you know it was the right time to exit when there was obviously still a lot of blue sky for the business?
Look, it was. I think it was just the amount was. I was pretty burnt out at that time as well. You get. I was talking to someone about this the other day, that you just get to a point where the phone rings and you're like, oh, Jesus, what's going to go on now?
Which is actually an interesting thing. Sorry, I'm going to interrupt there. But for franchisors, because they're plugging away, and it's just like, oh, shit, that franchisee's just called. Yep. I'm not going to answer that call. So that is that the 100%. The time to exit. It's like things that used to be fun and exciting are now a pain in the ass.
Yeah, look, the
number was big. I know the number. Yeah, it
was a big number, which helped. And we were trading really well, and we were always taught that you got to leave something for the next guy as well, because it makes it such an easier sale, and that was our mentality. But we were burnt. It was bloody hard slog, and it'd be many nights I'd be sitting in the corner sucking my thumb, thinking, "What the fuck have I done?
Yeah,
what am I doing?"
So that's a combination of this is going to set my family up, so the exit's going to work, but also I'm kind of done. So
yeah, and I think Stuart died the day after we signed the term sheet, as well. So that was that was a massive kick. That really sent me over the edge with Nick as well, because it was his brother-in-law. So that was pretty tough. But it was the right time. If I think if I had my time over, knowing what I know now, we probably wouldn't have done it. But when you're young, I was 38, and I was like, okay, here's all this wad of money that's going to come in, and it was pretty cool.
Well, I think knowing when to stop and get out is critical, and to have a successful exit. I know there's other businesses that you've been involved in, and we can along the way, but going to pick one that wasn't so great. So the party shop. So you've I guess the thing for that is you've identified a position in the market as to there's a place here, and how did you go about that? Like out from bakeries to party.
Yep. Yep.
that spot and
We were just sort of having a look around for opportunities. Well, I was thinking I was doing it on my own at that stage, and I went around to there was no consolidated party group that had any size. This party shop group had six stores, 6 franchises, and that was like the biggest. I went to the UK to have a look at some stores, and then I arranged a meeting in New York with Amscan, that were the biggest suppliers of party products really around the world at the time, and they had Party City stores that were I think they had just over or just under 1,000 stores. So I arranged a supply deal with them. They were going to send all the product out at their cost. I did a new store design. I got much smarter people than myself in to have a look at the system, the process, the tech stack, all of that sort of cool stuff. I got a big piano then in there, like from the movie and Big, that jumped up and down on it. So I had smell machines in there, and TV screens up there playing old movies and people that feel good movies, all that sort of stuff. So I really went right into it to make sure that I covered every angle. And then when it happened, we opened a new store.
so there were stores.
There were 6 stores.
Yep. So
there were
you
6
bought,
franchises.
You bought the whole thing or just part of it?
I bought a share
Yep.
of a majority share. I'm trying to remember, it was so long ago, but the majority share from this team, the lady and
Yep.
not a husband and wife, but they were friends, and they wanted to grow it. So I
Yep.
paid, it was a couple $100,000 or something like that for it. And then they were part of that research process, and they'd been involved in the industry for a while. Really nice people. Didn't work out at the end. We had a blow up, but they were really nice people, good people.
And things, you've done a lot of research. There's, overseas examples of where this category has worked, and then
Yep.
It didn't work.
Yep.
So again, when was the time that you thought, like, why didn't it work, and when did you know that you were done?
Well, it was working at the start, and then Julia Gillard announced an election 10 months down the track. If you remember that,
10 months?
Yeah, it was like a mad time. It was like,
Jesus.
it must have been close to 10 months, and everything just sort of stopped. But that's a bit of a fucking excuse, to tell you the truth. But I mean, it was working, but it did go down. But where we really got caught is when there's about 26, 27,000 SKUs that you have in a party shop store. So you got to carry everything, or else it just doesn't work. People want to have a one-stop shop with that sort of stuff. The price point was probably a little bit high because of the American dollar, and they were shipping it in. So we were tweaking that and getting that down. So that was starting to move. But the real killer was the big movie. When there was a new movie coming out, or there was something themed that was coming out, we were not getting those until it was well down the track, because it was all going to the Party City stores
In the US.
In the US. So we were just left selling the same shit. So we had we weren't up to date, we weren't current. And it was at that point really that I realised that it just wasn't going to go anywhere, that it was going to be putting good money after bad. So that's when we pulled the pin.
Yeah. So you've realised that, the supply chain, you hadn't managed your supply chain. It wasn't going to improve quickly.
Yep.
And so you were just flogging a dead horse. Yeah.
Had to go.
And so that managing supply chain, like working out what are your core products, is that the biggest learning you got out of that? And
controlling the product flow. Yeah.
Yep.
Absolutely. You got to be in charge of that no matter what, because it's just to have your success in someone else's hands completely for a franchise business. It's you're exposing yourself. Not saying it's not going to work, but in that case, we were in a lot of trouble.
And so now roll forward to BDC Investments. So the plan is to, you started a business to invest into emerging franchise brands to support founders to grow their business. Along the last, 12 to 18 months, you've looked at a lot of businesses. You do have other investments, but, when you're looking at these franchisors, there's whatever 70% of the market are emerging franchisors in Australia. What are some of the things that you're looking at to go, well, why do we pick this one? Like, what are the criteria, or what are the things that you're assessing in these franchise brands?
The first one really is the model. Is the model working? So they within their network, and they're usually sort of 15 to 20 stores or out franchises, whatever. Are there franchises in there that are really working? And is it scalable? That's what we're after. Is it actually working? Sure, there's going to be some that are not working because of various reasons. But can it be exactly like Michelle's? Can we just go, right, put that one there in the right spot, put that one there with the right franchisees? That's the big one that we're looking at. And then it's the next person who's going to be our partner in it. Who's the franchisor? Who's the current founder or owner, whatever you want to call them.
So it's the people, yeah.
Yeah.
So does the model work? Are there franchisees that are making money?
Yep.
And then is the franchisor, the founder, someone that I can work with?
100%. And usually I'm looking for people that are humble, that are just nice people, that are not money hungry. Good franchisors should not be money hungry. That comes if you're trying to behave and rip out every bit of profit, every percentage point here and there from the franchisee. It's not right. They have to have that mentality to make them money. That's
which is
really
really tricky in those first stages, isn't it? So
100%.
when you've got less than 20 stores, and generally the franchisor doesn't have enough money to support the franchisees. So it's making sure that each franchisee is profitable, which then leads to the franchisor being able to support them properly. And so in terms of once you've worked out that, there is a model here and you've got some people. So what do you think, what can you add value? Because like looking at, bigger private equity funds come in the US and globally and say, well, we can come in and we can do marketing and we can do HR and we can do all these back office things. But we're a small investment business. We don't have hundreds of people. So how are you adding value to the businesses?
Yeah, but the first thing that after if we make the decision to go ahead is like, what are the critical, what's the shit that we have to clean up? And they're all in any business of that size, there's going to be skeletons in the closet, and they need to be tidied up straight away. You need to get every franchisee on the bus. You need to listen to what they've got to say. Scott, we were talking about it before. They're our customer. What are we doing well? What are we doing poorly? What can we improve on?
Lots of franchisors are scared to hear what they've got to say.
I love that shit because if you hear it, you can do something about it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, just go and stick your head up.
Yeah, but they're probably talking to each other if they're not talking to you anyway. So
of course, and just getting their trust and trust that you are genuinely there to do the right thing by them is absolutely critical.
Cool. And then lastly, if you're a founder of a franchisor and you're thinking about whether I should bring on someone to invest in my business, what should they be thinking?
It's an interesting question. I suppose if they're not handing over with BDC Investments, we don't want to take control. We want to have a smaller investment. We own 20, 25, 30, 40%, whatever. But I don't want to go over 50% unless they want us to at a later stage.
So they've got to think about, they've got control, but they've got a sophisticated party to come and support them in there.
Yeah.
So they have to get their head around that.
They have to be confident that we can do what we say we're going to do. They have to believe our bullshit. Not that it's bullshit.
Yeah, but from their point of view, before they make that decision, firstly they're going to have someone else in their business. So they're, even though they're the majority, they're still going to be accountable to things, which is a bit different when you're an entrepreneur and you can just do whatever you like.
Yep. But we set it up that way so we get a say, but we don't want control. I mean, if you're going to start having arguments about which way that's going to go, that's never really going to work anyhow. You've got to be on the same journey and putting a budget forward and a plan. So it's like, that's what we can get behind. That's it, because that's bloody tough. Handing your baby over to an extent is bloody hard.
Yeah, so I think there's a few different ways that founders can go. obviously they can pay for trusted advisors. They can bring in an advisory board, but this is like someone that's actually got skin in the game. So it's kind of at the heart of franchising,
Of course.
but at the franchisor level. So I think, and being able to really reflect on your own strengths and weaknesses, I think is really important.
Definitely.
As a founder, and thinking, well, what's something, how can I, like, what sort of support do I need?
Yep. What gaps need to be filled?
And how and who are the people? So whether it's us as BDC Investments or whether it's someone else, understanding that. Cool. Well, thank you very much for
Thanks,
for that.
Bruce. That was a delightful interview. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to our BDC Partners podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard today, don't forget to like and subscribe.